I was 16 years old the night my parents told the entire family I had run away. It wasn't a quiet goodbye, it was loud, ugly, and final. My mother stood in the doorway with tears in her eyes that looked real to everyone else, while my father kept his arms crossed like he was doing the hardest thing a parent could do. They told my aunts, uncles, cousins, and even the neighbors the same story. I had become rebellious. I had stolen money from the family business, and I had chosen to leave them behind in the middle of the night. No one questioned it. If you have ever been thrown out by your own parents and then listen as they rewrote your entire life into a lie, drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. My name is Sienna Brooks, and this is the story of how my parents told the entire family I ran away at 16, and how 11 years later, I walked back into their house holding the deed in my hand. I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, in a big two-story house with a wide front porch and a backyard that backed up to the woods. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. My father, Robert, owned a mid-sized construction company that built homes for the growing suburbs. My mother, Patricia, was active in the church and ran the local PTA. They smiled in all the family photos and told everyone how blessed they were. But inside that house, love came with conditions. I was the middle child. My older brother had joined the military right after high school and was rarely home. My younger sister was the golden child, quiet, obedient, always doing what my parents expected. I was the one who asked too many questions, the one who wanted to go to college far away, the one who didn't fit the picture they had painted for our family. When I was 15, I started noticing things that didn't make sense. Large cash withdrawals from the company accounts, charity events where the money raised never seemed to reach the organizations, late-night arguments between my parents about covering tracks. I didn't understand the full picture, but I knew something was wrong. One night, I made the mistake of confronting them. I told them I had seen the bank statements. I told them I knew they were taking money that wasn't theirs. My mother's face went pale. My father grabbed me by the arm so hard it left bruises and dragged me to the front door. That same night, they packed a small bag, put me on the porch, and told me I was no longer welcome in their home or their family. My mother looked me in the eyes and said the words that would follow me for the next 11 years. If you ever try to come back or tell anyone what you think you saw, we will make sure the entire family and the whole town knows you ran away because you were stealing from us. No one will believe you. No one will help you. You will be completely alone. My father didn't say a word. He just stood there and watched as I walked into the rain with nothing but that small bag. I was 16. I slept under a bridge the first night. The second night, I found a shelter. Within a week, I was washing dishes at a diner in a neighboring town just to eat. I was scared, hungry, and completely alone. But the anger I felt was stronger than the fear. I knew I couldn't go back. For the next 11 years, I survived on my own. I moved from city to city, taking every job I could find. I got my GED at night. I worked construction during the day. I saved every penny I earned. I learned about real estate, about investing, about building something from nothing. I never used my real name in any official documents for the first few years because I was terrified my parents would find me and finish what they started. I became someone they would never recognize. I built a small real estate company from the ground up. I bought cheap, run-down properties, fixed them with my own hands, and sold them for profit. I worked harder than I ever thought possible because I had something to prove. Not to them, but to myself. 11 years, 3 months, and 21 days after they threw me out, I stood on the same front porch of that big two-story house in Knoxville. But this time, I wasn't the scared 16-year-old girl they had discarded. This time, I was the woman who owned it. I held the official deed in my hand, the legal document that proved the bank had foreclosed on the property due to years of hidden debt and bad investments. The same house they had used to pretend we were the perfect family was now legally mine. I rang the doorbell. My mother opened the door. The moment her eyes landed on me, her face went completely white. "Harper?" she whispered, like she had seen a ghost. I looked at her calmly and said, "I'm home." Everything was finally falling into place. Or so I thought. But the real moment, the one that would make them regret every single lie they had ever told about me, was still coming. My mother stood frozen in the doorway, her hand still gripping the edge of the door like she was afraid it might disappear if she let go. Her eyes moved slowly from my face to the folder I was holding, then back to my face again. For a few long seconds, she didn't say anything. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Harper? Is that really you?" I looked at her calmly. "It's me," I said. "And I'm here because this house belongs to me now." Behind her, I heard my father's heavy footsteps coming down the hallway. He appeared in the foyer, still wearing the same faded blue work shirt he used to wear when I was a kid. The moment his eyes landed on me, his expression changed from confusion to shock, and then to something much darker. "What the hell are you doing here?" he growled, stepping forward. I didn't flinch. I held up the folder so both of them could see it clearly. "I'm here because I bought this house. The bank foreclosed on it. I purchased it at auction 2 weeks ago. The deed is in my name." The silence that followed was so thick I could hear the old grandfather clock ticking in the living room. My mother's face went completely white. She took a small step back as if the words themselves had pushed her. "You're lying," my father said, but his voice lacked the confidence it used to have. "You can't just show up after 11 years and claim our house." I opened the folder and pulled out the top document, the official deed with my name clearly printed on it. "I'm not claiming anything," I said. "I own it. Legally. You can check the county records if you don't believe me." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. She looked like she might faint. My father stared at the paper in my hand like it was a weapon pointed directly at him. "You can't do this," he said, his voice rising. "This is our home. We raised you here. We built this life." I looked at him for a long moment. "You didn't raise me," I replied quietly. "You threw me out when I was 16 and told everyone I ran away because I was a thief. You made sure the entire town believed I was worthless. You erased me so completely that no one even looked for me. And now you're standing here telling me this is still your home?" My mother started crying softly. "We were scared. We had made mistakes with the charity money. We thought if you told anyone, it would destroy everything we had built." I felt a cold laugh rise in my throat. "So you destroyed we instead. You chose your reputation over your own daughter, and you made sure no one would ever believe me if I tried to tell the truth." My father's face turned red with anger, but there was fear in his eyes now. Real fear. "You have no proof of anything," he said. "It's your word against ours, and everyone already knows what kind of girl you were." I smiled calmly. "That's the beautiful thing about time," I said. 11 years is long enough for a girl to grow up, long enough to build something real, long enough to hire the best forensic accountants in the state. I pulled out another document from the folder and held it up. This is a summary from a respected accounting firm. It shows every fake invoice, every redirected donation, and every dollar you funneled into your personal accounts from the Children's Hospital charity. It's all here. My mother's knees buckled. She grabbed the door frame to steady herself. My father stared at the paper in my hand like it was a weapon pointed directly at him. "You can't do this," he said, but his voice had lost its power. I put the paper back in the folder. "I haven't decided yet," I said honestly, "but I want you both to understand something. I'm giving you 48 hours to pack your personal belongings and leave this house. After that, the locks will be changed. Any furniture or items that belong to the house, stay here." My mother started crying harder. "You can't do this to us," she sobbed. "This is our home." "No," I said softly. "This stopped being your home the night you chose money and reputation over your own daughter." My father looked like he wanted to hit me, but he knew better. He knew the power had completely shifted. I turned to leave, but before I walked down the steps, I looked back one last time. "And one more thing," I said. "If either of you tries to spread any more lies about me in this town, I will make sure everyone knows exactly what you did with that charity money. I have the proof now. All of it." I didn't wait for their reaction. I walked back to my car and drove away, leaving them standing in the doorway of the house that no longer belonged to them. Everything was finally falling into place, or so I thought. But the real war, the one that would force my parents to face every single lie that had ever told, was only just beginning. I drove away from the house that night with my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The folder with the deed and the financial evidence sat on the passenger seat like a loaded weapon. For 11 years, I had imagined this moment, standing in front of my parents and telling them the house was no longer theirs. Now that it had happened, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the beginning of something much bigger. I didn't go back to the hotel right away. I drove around Asheville for almost an hour, passing the places that held pieces of my old life. The diner where I used to wash dishes at 17, the bridge where I slept for 3 nights when I first left home, the high school I never got to graduate from. Every street carried a memory of survival, of fear, of the girl I used to be. When I finally returned to my hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. The anger that had kept me going for 11 years was still there, but it felt different now. It wasn't burning wildly anymore. It was focused, sharp, ready. The next morning, my phone started ringing before I even opened my eyes. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father called. Then my aunt. Then another relative. Within an hour, I had over 20 missed calls and messages. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I called my attorney and told her what had happened at the house. She advised me to document everything and to be prepared for them to fight back legally. I already knew they would. By afternoon, the whispers in Asheville had started spreading again. Old neighbors were talking. Relatives were calling each other. The story my parents had told 11 years ago, that I was a runaway thief, was being brought up again. But this time, people were also talking about the house. I stayed calm. I knew the truth was on my side now. I had the deed. I had the financial records. I had 11 years of proof that I had built a life from nothing while they had been hiding their mistakes. That evening, my mother showed up at the hotel. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were swollen and her hands were shaking as she stood outside my room door. "Harper, please," she said the moment I opened the door. "We need to talk. Your father is losing his mind. He's saying he'll fight you in court. He's saying he'll tell everyone you manipulated the bank." I stepped aside and let her in. She sat on the edge of the bed, twisting her hands in her lap. "We made mistakes. We were scared.
The company was failing. We took money from the charity to keep things going. When you found out, we panicked. We thought if you told anyone, we would lose everything. I looked at her without speaking.
She continued, tears falling down her cheeks. We told everyone you ran away because we needed them to believe it. We thought it would protect us. We never thought you would come back like this. I sat down across from her and spoke quietly. You didn't just lie about me running away, I said. You told everyone I was a thief. You made sure no one would ever look for me. You erased me so completely that I had to survive on the streets at 16. And now you're here telling me you were scared? She nodded, sobbing. I know what we did was unforgivable, but please, Harper, don't take the house. It's the only thing we have left. I felt something inside me twist. You had 11 years to be my parents. 11 years to make it right. Instead, you chose to protect yourselves. Now I'm choosing to protect myself. She tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. I'm giving you 48 hours to leave the house, I said. After that, the locks will be changed. Any personal items you leave behind will be stored, but the house is no longer yours. She left after that, crying quietly as she walked down the hallway. I didn't feel happy watching her go. I felt exhausted, but I also felt free. The next 2 days were tense. My father tried to call me several times. I didn't answer. Relatives sent messages accusing me of being heartless. I didn't reply to any of them. On the evening of the second day, I drove back to the house with my attorney and a locksmith. The driveway was empty. The lights were off. The house looked dark and abandoned. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house was silent. Most of the furniture was still there, but all the personal photos and small items were gone. They had taken what mattered to them and left the rest behind. On the kitchen counter, there was a single envelope with my name on it in my mother's handwriting. I opened it. Inside was a short note. We're gone. The house is yours. I hope you're happy now. Mom. No apology, no explanation, just those cold words. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. I walked through every room slowly. The bedroom where I used to cry myself to sleep, the kitchen where they had told me I was dead to them, the living room where they had entertained guests while pretending to be the perfect family. In the backyard, I found the fire pit where my father had burned my dreams 11 years ago. I stood there for a long time. Then I lit a small fire and burned my mother's note. As the paper turned to ash, I felt something inside me finally release. The girl who had been thrown away at 16 was gone. The woman standing in the backyard of the house she now owned was someone new, someone they would never be able to break again. The silence after my parents drove away lasted longer than I expected. I stood on the porch for almost 20 minutes, watching the empty road where the moving truck had disappeared. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled of wet earth and pine. For the first time in 11 years, the house behind me felt completely mine, not just on paper, but in my bones. I walked back inside and closed the front door. The sound of the latch clicking felt louder than it should have. I leaned against the door for a moment, letting the quiet settle around me. The house no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a blank page. I spent the next few days making small changes that mattered only to me. I removed the heavy curtains my mother had chosen to make the house look respectable. I painted the living room walls a soft, warm gray that felt calm instead of cold. I replaced the old dining table where we had eaten so many silent meals with a lighter, simpler one. Every time I changed something, it felt like I was slowly erasing the version of Harper they had tried to create. But the past doesn't disappear just because you repaint the walls. On the 5th day, I received a certified letter from my parents' lawyer. They were contesting the foreclosure and claiming the auction had been handled improperly. They demanded I vacate the property immediately or face legal action. They also accused me of harassing them by showing up at the house unannounced. I read the letter twice and then called my attorney. She didn't sound surprised. "They're grasping at straws," she said. "The foreclosure was clean. They're just trying to scare you into giving them something. We can shut this down quickly if you want." I thought about it for a moment. "Don't shut it down quickly," I told her. "Let them feel the process. Let them wait the way I waited for 11 years. I hung up and sat in the kitchen, staring at the letter. Part of me wanted to end this fast and move on. Another part of me knew that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is make someone wait for the consequences they created. That evening, I did something I hadn't done since I returned to Asheville. I drove to the children's hospital, the same one my parents had quietly stolen from all those years ago. I met with the director and made a donation under my own name. It wasn't enormous, but it was enough to fund new equipment for the pediatric ward. I asked them to keep my name private for now. The director hugged me when she accepted the check. As I left the hospital, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about balance, about taking back what was stolen and giving something good in return. When I got back to the house, my phone rang. It was my cousin Derek again. "I heard my aunt and uncle are fighting the foreclosure. The family group chat is blowing up. Some people are saying you're being cruel. Others are starting to ask questions about what really happened when you left at 16. I didn't feel angry. I felt tired. "Let them talk," I said. "I'm not here to explain myself to people who believed their lies for 11 years. Derek was quiet for a moment. He said, "I get it. And for what it's worth, a few of us are starting to see things differently now." After the call ended, I sat on the back porch and watched the sun set over the mountains. The sky turned soft orange and pink. For the first time since I had come back to Asheville, I didn't feel like I was fighting against something. I felt like I was building something. But I knew my parents weren't finished. 2 days later, my father showed up at the house again. This time he didn't ring the doorbell. He stood in the driveway and waited until I came outside. He looked older, more tired, but the hardness in his eyes was still there. "We need to talk," he said. I stayed on the porch steps and didn't invite him closer. "What is there left to say?" I asked. He looked at the house behind me, then back at me. "We're willing to make a deal," he said. "We'll drop the legal challenge if you agree to sell the house back to us at a fair price. We'll even give you extra for your trouble. Just don't do this to us." I looked at him for a long moment. "You still don't understand," I said. "I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because this house is the last thing you took from me, and I'm taking it back." His jaw tightened. "You're going to regret this," he said. "We still have friends in this town. We still have influence. One word from us, and people will remember the girl who ran away and stole from her own family." I smiled calmly. "Let them remember," I said. "I'm not the 16-year-old girl anymore. I'm the woman who now owns the house you raised me in. And I'm the woman who knows exactly what you did with that charity money." He stared at me, his face pale. I continued, my voice steady. "I have every record, every email, every redirected donation. If you push me, I will make sure the entire town and the authorities see it all."
He didn't say anything else. He just turned around and walked back to his car. I watched him drive away and felt something inside me finally settle. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about closure. And I was almost there. The weeks after my father's last visit were some of the strangest I had ever experienced. The house was quiet in a way it had never been before. No more surprise visits from my mother. No more angry phone calls from relatives. No more threats from my father. It was as if they had finally accepted that the house was no longer theirs. But I knew better. Silence from my parents had never meant surrender. It usually meant they were planning their next move. I tried to focus on making the house feel like home. I painted the living room walls a soft sage green. I replaced the heavy dining table with a lighter one that let the sunlight fall across it in the mornings. I even planted flowers in the backyard where the old fire pit used to be. Every small change felt like I was slowly writing a new chapter over the old one. But the past kept knocking. One afternoon, my cousin Derek called me again. His voice was hesitant. "Harper, I don't know how to say this, but some relatives are starting a group chat. They're saying you forced mom and dad out of their home and that you're using old family money to do it. They're asking me to take sides." I let out a tired breath. I'm not asking anyone to take sides. I bought a foreclosed house. That's it. Derek was quiet for a moment. "I know," he said, "but they're bringing up the old story again. The one about you running away and stealing money. Some of them are believing it all over again." I felt a familiar heaviness in my chest.
Let them believe what they want, I replied. I'm done trying to convince people who already made up their minds 11 years ago. After the call, I sat on the back porch and stared at the mountains. I had spent so many years running from this town, from this story, from this family. Now that I was back, I realized I didn't have to keep running. I just had to stop caring what they thought. But stopping is harder than it sounds. 2 days later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my mother. No return address, just my name written in her neat handwriting on the envelope. I opened it on the porch. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Harper, we're staying with your uncle in Greenville for now. Your father isn't doing well. The stress of losing the house has affected his health. I know you don't owe us anything. I know we don't deserve your kindness. But if there is any part of you that can find it in your heart to help us keep at least one small piece of our dignity, we would be grateful. We're not asking for the house back. We're asking you not to tell the town what we did with the charity money. Some things are better left in the past. Mom." I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it and put it back in the envelope. I didn't feel anger. I felt disappointment. Even after everything, they still wanted me to protect their image. They still wanted me to stay silent so they could keep pretending they were good people. I didn't reply to the letter. Instead, I called the children's hospital and asked them to go ahead with the public announcement of the new wing I had funded. I told them they could use my real name. The announcement was made 2 days later. The local newspaper ran a small article. The headline read, "Local woman returns after 11 years, donates to Children's Hospital wing in honor of her younger self." The article didn't mention my parents by name, but everyone in Asheville knew exactly who the younger self referred to. The story of the girl who was thrown out at 16 and came back as the owner of her family home spread quickly. My phone started ringing again. This time, some of the calls were from people who had believed my parents' story for years. A few left voicemails apologizing. Others asked for the real story. I didn't answer any of them. I had already told my story the only way that mattered, by living it. One evening, while I was sitting on the porch watching the sunset, my cousin Derek came by again. He brought a small plant as a housewarming gift. "I heard about the hospital donation," he said as he sat down. A lot of people are talking about it. Some are saying your parents' version of what happened doesn't add up anymore. I nodded, but didn't say much. Derek looked at me for a moment. You don't have to tell me anything, but if you ever want to, I'm here to listen. No judgment. I smiled a little. Thank you, I said. That means more than you know. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. For the first time since I returned to Asheville, I didn't feel like I was fighting alone. But I also knew that my parents were still out there, and they were not the type to disappear quietly. The final blow came 2 weeks later. My mother called me from a number I didn't recognize. Her voice was hoarse, like she had been crying for days. Harper, your father had a heart attack last night. He's in the hospital. The doctors say it's serious. Please, he wants to see you. I felt my stomach drop. Everything was finally falling into place, or so I thought. But the real test, the one that would force me to decide whether I could forgive or simply let go, was still waiting for me. The call about my father's heart attack came at 2:47 a.m. My mother's voice was shaking so badly, I could barely understand her at first. Harper, your father collapsed. They're saying it's a heart attack. He's in the ICU. He keeps asking for you. Please, just come. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, the phone pressed to my ear, and felt nothing for a few seconds. Not anger, not sadness, just the strange, heavy numbness. I'll be there, I said quietly. I drove to the hospital in the middle of the night with the windows down, the cool Asheville air hitting my face. The streets were empty. The mountains in the distance were black silhouettes against the sky. I kept thinking about the last time I had seen my father, the way he had stood in the driveway and told me I would regret taking the house. Now, he was lying in a hospital bed, and I was the one being asked to come. When I arrived at the ICU, my mother was sitting in the waiting area, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Her eyes were swollen, her hair messy. The moment she saw me, she stood up and tried to hug me, but I gently stepped back. How is he? I asked. She wiped her eyes. They stabilized him, but it was bad. The doctor said the stress of everything that's happened might have triggered it. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and followed her to his room. My father looked pale and small in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors and an IV. His eyes opened when I walked in. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then he motioned weakly for me to come closer. I sat in the chair beside the bed. My mother stayed by the door, giving us space. He reached out and took my hand. His grip was weak, but he held on. I know I don't deserve this, he said. His voice raspy. I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything, but I needed to see you. I needed to tell you, I'm sorry. I stayed silent, letting him speak. I was a coward. I was so scared of losing control, of losing the life we had built, that I destroyed the one person who could have made it better. I told myself I was protecting the family, but I was only protecting myself. Tears slipped down his cheeks. I threw you out because I was terrified you would tell the truth about the money. I made up the story about you running away because I needed everyone to believe I was still the good father. I was wrong, Harper. I was so wrong. I looked at the man who had once been larger than life to me. The man who had thrown me out in the rain at 16. The man who had spent 11 years pretending I didn't exist. I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'm not here to punish you anymore. I'm here because you're still my father, even after everything. He squeezed my hand weakly. "Thank you," he whispered. "That's more than I deserve." My mother stepped forward then, crying openly. "We're selling the house back to you for whatever you paid," she said. "We don't want it anymore. We're moving away. We just want you to be happy." I looked at both of them for a long time. "I already am," I said. I stayed at the hospital until morning. I didn't forgive them that night. I didn't promise to forget, but I sat with them. I listened. And when I left, I felt something I hadn't felt in 11 years. Closure. The weeks that followed were some of the most peaceful I had known since I was a child. I finished renovating the house. I turned the guest house into a small, safe space for girls who had been forced to leave their homes, just like I had been. I named it after the girl I used to be, the one who had been erased at 16. I started living. I went on walks without looking over my shoulder. I made friends without worrying about what my parents would say. I built a life that belonged only to me. One evening, while I was sitting on the back porch watching the sunset, my cousin Derek came by. He brought flowers and a bottle of wine. "I heard your parents moved to the coast," he said as he sat down. "The family is still talking, but a lot of people are starting to see things differently now." I smiled. "I'm not worried about what they think anymore," I said. Derek nodded. "You look different. Happier." "I am," I told him. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, I realized something important. I had spent 11 years surviving what they did to me. Now I was finally living beyond it. If you have ever been thrown away by your own family and had to fight your way back, drop a comment and tell me your city. I read every single one. You know, looking back at everything that happened, I've come to understand one simple truth. Sometimes the people who raise you are not the ones meant to keep you safe. And that's okay, because the moment you stop waiting for them to choose you, you finally become free to choose yourself. I chose myself, and I've never regretted it for a single day.